Welcome back to the channel. We are here once again with my Dell 3880 desktop PC over here, which for 2021 was the cheapest desktop Dell I could buy in like a normal-ish form factor. And I do mean this specific one. So this is the lowest spec model available for sale when I bought it. And the goal of this series of videos is to go from the all the way worst Dell I could buy all the way to as good as I can do, roughly, without going crazy within budget and things like that. There is a playlist for this guy, which I will link right up there, as well as down in the description for you, so you can go get all caught up on all the things that have happened inside of this thing to this point, if you would like. What we're here to do in today's video is upgrade the power supply in that thing, and we're gonna go about it through 3 different ways. I'm sure many of you have already noticed that there are timestamps down along the progress bar of this video, because I talk forever and most of you don't want to hear it. Feel free to just jump ahead. I will just say it right up front that in all these methods I am standing on the backs of other giants. I did not invent any of this stuff. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I've done all the same Googling and YouTubing and everything else that most of you likely have, and have come up with these conclusions through those avenues already. So where appropriate, I'm going to try and shout a couple people out and stuff like that. And just because I have one preference doesn't mean it has to be your preference, or if you see somebody else say something, it doesn't mean that one of us is right and the other one's wrong. We could just be different. And I will almost promise you I will be different from everyone else. Let me state my case. So in order from my least to favorite option here, option 1 being my least is a Dell replacement power supply that directly bolts into this thing that you just buy on eBay off of a used reseller and slap in there. Option 2 is an SFX form factor PSU that just kind of loosely fits where the factory one would have gone. And option 3 is a regular good old-fashioned ATX power supply that will not fit inside the case at all. So when we're done, you're gonna have a box sitting behind this box with an umbilical cord of wires between the two of them. And this is my favorite approach. I know it sounds crazy. Let me explain. Oh, and before we continue on, I should explain, this is a 600 watt power supply, this is a 650, and this is a 360. So both of these are approaching twice the capacity of this upgraded factory Dell one as well. I think the first thing we need to do when we hit this point in the upgrades for the Dell, where we're basically taking the lungs of the thing out. We're performing a major organ transplant here. You know, you need to pat yourself on the back, give yourself a hug, whatever you need to do to come to terms with the fact that you have bought the wrong computer. You're not a bad person because you bought the wrong computer. It just happens. In the case of me as a child, my parents just bought whatever they bought and they didn't know any better. So odds are good many of you could just be in that situation too. And now I think the thing to do is just reconcile that with yourself and figure out a plan to get out of this computer. So really what I'm saying is, for you, this was the wrong computer from the start. So you have dug a hole, and now it's time to put the shovel down so you don't make the hole any worse and dig your way out. My intended answer for this problem is going to be with this ATX power supply, because right now ATX is still the most standard power supply you can buy. This has been around for 20-25 years at this point. You should be able to find all kinds of cases inexpensively that will take an ATX power supply. There's really no magic there. There will be some gremlins with both of these, getting them to work with the Dell, but as I said earlier, the goal here is to get you away from the Dell. So in my opinion, once you have gotten to this point, you are in a chain of events that cannot be stopped or should not be stopped, where you're going to cascade 3 upgrades from this one thing. You're going to change out the power supply, then we're going to buy a new case, and then ultimately we're going to buy a new motherboard, and eventually our entire Dell is going to move over to a new case and then right back into this case as a Dell, and you are going to have a standalone computer next to it. So if you take the exact steps that I'm going to take, that is where they're going to lead you. You're going to end up with a Dell you can do whatever you want with, and then the computer that you probably should have bought the first time. And since the whole idea is to be as standardized as possible, that's why we're going with the ATX as my desired approach. Next option down the line is the SFX power supply. Basically, these two things are roughly analogously the same. They're just different sizes and shapes. But SFX, the only advantage it has is we're basically doing the same thing here. We're going to something more standardized, but this physically fits inside that case. It doesn't actually install into it. You don't really screw it in. Maybe I can figure out a way to do it without going crazy, but it is still kind of a bootleg version of something good to do inside of that case. And the price goes up here as we go down the tree too. So I know it sounds weird that the least appealing option visually, with the cords hanging out of the back and all that stuff, would be the ATX. First of all, let's just look at this for pure dollars for what you're getting. Both of these options over here are brand new power supplies with warranties and all that stuff, and depending on prices in the market, they cost what they cost. This guy is going to be used. You probably can eventually get someone on the phone to sell one of these to you from Dell or through Dell Parts or whatever. I'm going to guess to buy this from Dell, it's probably a few $100s. So I'm going to say 99.98% of you out there are going to be looking on eBay trying to get one of these used with no warranty. In this form factor, they actually do make these up to 500 watts, but those are very expensive, and used, those cost more than I think both of these combined. So for me, either one of these are a much better value. At the time I got this one, I actually got a really good deal on it, but that brings me into my next point. That also at the time I bought this one, no idiot on YouTube had made a video saying, hey, this is the power supply you buy to upgrade your Dell. And despite standing on the backs of all those giants out there who have been there and done it before me, the various blog posts and message forum posts and stuff like that where they have posted that information don't seem to get as much traction as my channel. And that's not me trying to throw rocks at anybody out there that have done any of that before, but just from what I'm seeing from the number of people asking me this question, they are not finding that information, or they don't value it for whatever reasons, even though it's the information that I'm using to make this video. So with that said, as soon as a couple thousand people come to this video and start looking up this power supply family, and by the way, links in the description for all this stuff as much as I possibly can, you guys are all going to be competing with each other to buy these. So this one was 360 watts, and I think the day I got it was $40-ish. The next person is probably going to pay 42 because the next recycler of power supplies is just going to increment the price up a little bit. Then once that one sells for 42, the next one's going to be 45, and so on and so forth on down the line. Plus, this is the little one. It might be the biggest option you could have gotten in this case originally, or maybe even bigger. But in the grand scheme of things, this is a little tiny Tinker Toy power supply. If we're going to go through the trouble here, why not do something where we're going to end up with enough power at the end of the day to really do something? And 600 and 650 on these guys, I just bought them that size because it was a good price point in the market and good availability in the market. Power supply availability and prices have been all over the map, like a lot of things with the last year of COVID world, or whatever you want to call it. So these could be 750 watt, they could be 1000 watt, they could be anything you want. Over here, the biggest one they ever made was 500. When I was shopping, they were, I think, like $170, and there was only a couple of them on eBay. But as soon as you guys go out there and go feeding frenzy over the seemingly easy ones and the seemingly cheap one, it won't be cheap or easy anymore. Well, it might still be easy, but it won't be cheap because these will all be gone. You guys will compete with each other. And the reason I can say that with some authority is because of this guy right here, the optical drive that we put in this thing several months back. I suppose I don't have any way to take all the credit for it myself, so I'll just say half the credit. My audience has bought Amazon out of that drive probably at least a half dozen times since that video has come out, to the point that I saw people buying used drives, and to the point that I found this drive just under like a different listing and linked that, and we have sold Amazon out of that link as well a couple times. You guys who don't operate in YouTube world here quite the same way I do don't see all the data behind the scenes. And by the way, if you're worried about it at all, I can't see who buys what. I just see that the stuff is selling and how much people bought it for and what my commission on the link is. So like my 3% or 30 cents or whatever, if somebody buys one of these through my link. But anyway, I think right now this video has a few thousand views, and I would say way more people have asked me about power supplies than ever did ask me about CD-ROMs. And that could be kind of a double-edged sword because I made this video early, so not as many people would ask, right? But I don't know. What I do know is hundreds of people have asked me about power supplies, and there are not hundreds of these on eBay even right now. So another huge strike against this guy. And probably the final big strike is these things are used and they're coming out of equipment recyclers. I would suspect no matter whether or not you buy it from somebody that ships from the US or not, or from whatever part of the world you're in, that these are coming out of scrap machines that were sent to China and being sold back to you as parts. Well, what scrapped this machine out the first time? How was this treated in transit there and now back? How was this tested before it got to you? I'm not even sure if this one said it was tested. And I thought about developing a procedure to bench test this thing and actually measure all the outputs and document that and show you guys. But I think most of the people that are going to be leaning this direction are probably not going to have the tools necessary to do that. Frankly, I don't know how to do it either. I would have to invent it on my own. And if I plug this thing into mine, it blows mine up. That just makes for a better video. What you would have to decide is how you would feel if you plug this into yours and yours blew up. When we get there, I am going to take some precautions against that, but you get what I'm saying. So all the downsides of this guy are basically, we'll just say half the power output or twice as expensive. You can balance that however you want. You're probably going to have a rough time getting one unless you're one of the very first people who sees this video. And then if you're able to get one later on, you'll probably have to pay a fortune for it because you're going to be competing with everybody else. And it's used and you don't know what condition it's going to be in or anything else when you buy it. I am also reminded, from what I have researched, it also needs to be a very, very specific series of Dell power supply, because even if it looks just like this and it bolts in, and even if it plugs in, apparently Dell uses the same connector with a different pinout on it depending on model, so you can actually fry the motherboard by even buying just a slightly incorrect power supply. So for those reasons, either of these, the ATX or the SFX, would be my front runners. The reason the SFX is in second place is because I don't intend to buy an SFX power supply capable case, because ATX cases are cheaper and more readily available. Like any blanket statement, I'm sure there are exceptions, but generally speaking, that's what I'm seeing. Good old ATX power supply is the least expensive way to get to where I want to be in the end. So that is my train of logic. I'm thinking there's probably going to be a fairly strong division in camps between these two options. You're either going to go with the cheapest thing that works good, or you're going to go with the easiest thing that bolts in. SFX always has struck me as sort of a weird option, but a few of you have done it out there and emailed me, and there's enough interest in it that I think it's worth showing on the channel. One thing I really don't like about this option is this is now a 650 watt power supply inside of a little compact case that used to have, in my case, like what, a 200 watt power supply? So if you were actually able to max this thing all the way out, you would be putting 400 more watts of heat inside this thing than it was ever designed to exhaust. To a lesser extent, I think that's probably true if you bought like the 500 watt Dell power supply too, but at least these things are going to line up with the factory Dell vent exits and everything perfectly, because it should just all bolt in. So I think I pretty clearly made my case for my opinion of the options here. All of them have the oh so coveted PCI Express video card power head adapter. I'm assuming everybody that's interested in doing this is interested in doing it because they want a graphics card that is going to require this power. So as my custom, I've probably yapped way too long. So let's go ahead and get in here and just start doing it. The Dell PSU is going in first, even though it is my last choice. Also, people have repeatedly asked me to make these very detailed and very step by step. So if that pacing is too slow for you, feel free, just jump right ahead. Alrighty, first thing we need to do is remove our case side. These are thumb screws on the back, but they are also cut for a Phillips head screwdriver. Mine were kind of tight when I first got it, so take your screwdriver, crack those guys loose. You should be able to just use your fingers to finish loosening them on up. They will stay with the case side. Once you have them loose, just grab here and pull, and then the case will just kind of slide off the side. While we're here, to reassemble it, there are just tabs in the case side that align with windows in the case, both top and bottom. So you just kind of align those, slip the case side back on, push it forward, tighten your screws down, and it's back on. And I did just happen to think, although we're not going to run any actual testing on this power supply, it probably would be a good idea and maybe be kind of neat to just take the screws out of it and take the cover of it off to see if there's like anything obviously blown up inside of it. So we're going to take a couple minutes and do just that. And if anything, you can use this as a reference for your own if you choose to go this way, to see if anything looks way wrong with the one that you're about to plug into yours. Doesn't mean it's going to look identical to this one inside, but you know, way wrong should be not fully dissimilar to this. I can tell you from as tight as these screws are, this has probably not ever been taken apart. And speaking of, to finish getting it apart, much like the case side, there are little windows and slots in the bottom of this thing. And I found with this one that it helped to just kind of crack it open a little bit, and then we can just pull it right off those slots. So let's have a look and see if we see anything like obviously black. Nope. This thing looks pretty literally brand new. There's not even any dust in here, and I don't think I blew it out. And what I'm looking at specifically is like making sure none of the caps are exploded or dark stains on any of the chips or anything. I am not an electronics wizard. There are probably many of you out there that know more about what you're looking at here than I do. But overall, I don't see anything that's screaming, I should not plug this into the wall. So we're good, or I hope we're good. Reassembly. See there, I've just kind of lined those windows up. Yeah, it almost just falls back together. These are kind of some sort of like self-tapping screws, so you need to be kind of careful putting them back in. I like to start these in reverse until they catch a thread. Should actually feel it like drop in. That guy's not wanting to cooperate. Let's Try starting a different hole. So what you really don't want to do is cross thread these and get a bunch of metal inside your power supply from the little dust you're going to generate if you tear up the threads. That would not be good for anything. You can see what I mean. These are like flat ended screws that have cut their own threads in the sheet metal, so they're just kind of challenging to start. Just kind of looking to see if anything's misaligned, like maybe it was. Okay, so this is just going to end up being a game of me fighting with it for a little bit to get it right. You guys get the idea. Screws going in crooked, bad. Screws going in straight and cleanly and without force, good. That's all we're looking to do. So a short amount of time of pooping around later, I am back and I've got all the screws in. None of them were all that hard. Some of this stuff's just a bunch easier to do without a camera in your way, you know what I mean? So this guy's ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull as much expensive hardware out of this thing as I possibly can. So if something is wrong with this power supply, I don't fry all my stuff. So last episode we put this GT 1030 in. Check the playlist if you'd like. We're just gonna dip it right back out of there. Right there is my terabyte Samsung SSD. It is gonna come on out of there. I don't even want to think about how much these things probably cost right now. And for just schniggles, we'll go ahead and depopulate this stick of RAM too. I think it was only like 20 bucks, but whatever. It'll probably be easier for me to do that with it on its back. I was right. Okie dokie. So all that's left now is this mechanical hard drive that I really don't care about that much. My power supply, one stick of RAM, the CPU, DVD drive, again, not really a big issue. But the cool thing here is I don't think it should be a big deal to actually get this dude out of here. It looks like we are eventually going to have to fish the wire harness that comes out of it underneath the Wi-Fi antenna, which is annoying. But all the connections to the drives, I think, are made to the motherboard. So getting the actual power supply harness out isn't really such a big deal, I don't think. So I think I'm also going to take this CPU fan shroud off. You just grab the blue guys here and squeeze them. And this guy just kind of pulls out of there. Now I can get up here. That says ATX CPU up there. Now I should be able to depress the little latch on this connector, pull that guy out of our way, and the other wires are just held in with clips kind of along the case. Depending on what configuration you have in yours, if you have an optical drive or whatever, well, there could be different wires in your way. So that harness is out. Next one is this one that says ATX Sys right here. Same deal, we're gonna grab the latch on it, pull him out of there. Now I think we can just fish that harness out. Oh, there's another clip back here that I missed. There we go. I will not be making this effort to put the other harness behind the Wi-Fi antenna. That seems like a waste of effort. So that's all the wire harness there actually is on the PSU, all unplugged. Coming around back, we just have these 3 screws to pull. Now our power supply should just kind of wiggle on out of there, I think. Give it a little push. Does it slide in? Got another screw in it? Am I missing something? Is it actually clipped in somehow? I believe it is. I believe I'm gonna have to push it that way to get it to release. Is there a tab? There is a blue push button down here. That's what's going on. There are locking tabs in the back side of this guy, which I can see on the new one, and so can you. They're right there, little pockets. I'm gonna have to press that little blue button down, and then I bet that power supply just scrooches right on off of there. Yep, no big deal. All right, out she comes. And obviously I've not had both of these in my hands before, so I'm just giving them a visual look over, and visually they are identical other than the stickers on the side, and obviously the part numbers, which again, all the pertinent links down in the description. So mechanically, they are dead twins. There's our new hotness on the bottom. There's old and busted on the top. You can see 200 watts. Down here, 360 watts. Otherwise, they're brothers from another mother. They're actually probably from Mother Dell regardless, right? There's probably not much witchcraft in getting this guy to snap onto those tabs. And there they are. There's 1 and 2 that it snaps into. Probably just need to tuck him on in, get it lined up, and push, right? Hopefully not easier said than done. I feel like I'm getting one of them really easily and the other one I'm not getting at all. Right? Because that's, I believe, what just happened. There we go. Now I got them both. And to do that, I'm just using a finger to hold that blue button in and then just kind of wiggling it around. We have our 3 screws to put back in, route our wire harness how we feel is the most appropriate, plug the thing in, turn it on. I'm going to do that off camera because I think at this point you understand how to do this, and we'll catch up in a second. Alrighty, so that all went together exactly like the one that came out because it pretty much is the same thing. This is a PCIe power connector that would go right here if we had a video card in there that took one. There is a little bit of tape back there on the wire harness that you could cut off if you wanted to, if you needed some more slack in this guy. As it is, I ran the whole bundle up behind this first clip and over the top of the antenna wires, which I don't think is going to hurt anything, but if it hurts something for you, then don't do that. And then just right back up where everything else came from. And it laid in there literally exactly like the one we took out, so no big deal. Next move is to plug the guy in and see if smoke comes pouring out. And the way every Dell has worked for the last several years that I've been around them is as soon as you plug it in, it turns itself on for like a half second. It does some sort of self-check of some kind. So that is what I'm expecting to see this time. I think we can see just the corner of the CPU fan. We should be able to see our power light, and we can just kind of see our power supply if sparks go jumping out of there, setting the house on fire. Plug it in, and we'll see how it goes. And it did indeed do its a few second power up kind of thing. Actually, it's staying up. Normally it just shuts right back down. I can feel this hard drive spinning. Now it's shut down. I saw the CPU fan stop moving. Smoke didn't pour out of it. I am going to go ahead and turn it on, keeping in mind there's no boot drive in it because I took the SSD out, but it is coming on. See our CPU fan spinning, assuming we've got a PSU fan spinning. Touched the steel case and didn't get electrocuted, that's a plus. The green LED on the power supply is on. All right, there you go. So the next move for me is to shut this guy off, put the rest of my hardware back on it, and we'll actually plug it in, turn it on, and make sure it works. Alrighty, so I put my full faith in it. Everything's back installed. I've even got a monitor plugged into it. Plug it in. It's gonna do its weird power on thing, which it just did. No smoke pouring out yet. What's strange is this thing used to do a little power up and down thing a lot quicker, because there it just shut down. Usually it was like a second or two, now it's about 10 or 20. Push our button. Now it should actually be powering up, and if anything happens interesting on the screen, I will start capturing it. The BIOS is saying the amount of RAM changed, because it did. I just put the rest of the RAM back in it. Continue. Booted Windows normally. I'm just going to reboot it and see if I can see anything in the BIOS changed. I don't think it knew what power supply it had before anyway. Nope, BIOS is dumb as a post. But one thing I did do while I was experimenting is I went and got the kilowatt back out just because I was curious to see what the power draw on this power supply would be like. And the whole time it was in the BIOS, it was at like 40 watts. I wouldn't think it should really be any higher just because of a power supply change, but who knows? We'll give Windows a little bit of time here to settle down, see if we come up on something steady. So I'll give that a few minutes to decide what it wants to do. This has been a couple minutes and it has idled down to right about 20 watts. Which is pretty much where we were before. So Dell PSU installified and measured successfully. Looks like this time we gambled on the used market and we got some love in return. Who knows what anyone else could get. So keeping the theme of the thing I like the least to the most, let's grab our SFX next and get into it. Alrighty, so removing this larger Dell power supply is literally no different than removing the factory one, so I'm going to save you that. I'm going to pull my video card back out just to generate a little more room for myself. And I've left the CPU shroud off from before just so I have better access on this plug. Reach up here, grab the squeezy tab on this guy, pull that out, pull our wiring out of here, disconnect the ATX sys plug from the board. There we go, just like before. Pull stuff out of this connector on the case, fish our wires back out, take our 3 screws out of the back, push down on the blue tab and push the power supply and it will plop right out of there. Just like that. Alrighty, as you can see, this one happens to be an EVGA manufactured power supply. It also happens to be modular, which I didn't know because I haven't built a computer in 1,000 years. All that means is that the cables aren't permanently connected to the power supply. In the case of the Dell, that's actually a good thing because we only need those 2 power wires because the board provides power to all the drives. In the case of any other system on the planet or anything we might do in the future with this power supply, hint hint, nudge nudge, wink wink, you'll see this power supply again over on the Broken Tech channel, probably in 2022. We may need those wires, but the ATX Corsair I bought is not modular, so it's going to be a mess. That is an SFX power supply, and you can see it is pretty tiny. I do have giant hands, so that might be kind of throwing you for a loop. Grab a Dell power supply here. You can see that, you know, oh, and I'm bleeding. Yeah, that's cool. Hey, some of this stuff's sharp, you should know that. But you can see the SFX is a much different shape, but it is still very small. I'm going to go get a Band-Aid so I don't freak out half of you guys. And we're back. Good a time as any to mention those giants whose backs I'm standing upon. I've had many people comment to me or email me or whatever that they have done this SFX power supply swap, but I think there was one guy that sent me a blog post, which I will do my best to scour my email and find, as both these people contacted me months ago. But did a really nice blog write-up, and I will try and link that down in the description. So the first person to contact me about power supply upgrades was Mr. Andrew Bullis right here, and he's got a nice blog post about it that I will link down in the description. And he went through and documented everything about swapping in a larger Dell power supply and some of his rationale and stuff. You know, basically the rationale is you can buy one cheap because no one knows they're out there and bolt it in and you're done. And if that is still true in the future, then it's still a good option. But he goes through in a pretty large amount of detail Lots of good pictures and stuff in here. He did all this and put an AMD RX 550 in it. So he's got a nice little graphics card in there, and he even added some blinky lights when he was done. So he has removed the CPU dock that mine has and instead gone for a fan there, which is probably a better solution than just the duct alone. Of course, you can read through his entire blog and see all his rationale if you want. He was the first guy to reach out. And another person just sent me some pictures, which I will insert right here. Next up was a gentleman by the name of Jeff Colbert, who just hit me up in an email and said, hey man, I put an SFX power supply in mine. It doesn't really install all that well, but it does install. And this was, at the time, a completely novel concept to me. So this was the first time I'd even heard about an SFX power supply. And you'll be seeing more of this here in a minute. And he put a GTX 1660 in his with this upgraded power supply. And you will also be able to see he put a little bit more care into his wire management and everything than I did, because in the long run, and this is part of the conversation I had with Jeff at the time, I don't want to keep this solution. I want to move into a new case. And I've had that conversation with quite a few people, so I don't think it will come as a surprise. But in the case of both of these giants who reached out to me, hey guys, really appreciate the heads up. Thanks. So I'm not doing anything revolutionary. The one thing where I may be differing, perhaps, is within this padded envelope is the mod DIY power supply adapter you're going to need for your Dell to be able to power it up off of a standard ATX style plug. There has also been, I think, a write-up on the Dell support forums for like ages talking about ordering this. I did not realize Mod DIY was a Chinese company. It took like 3.5 months for this to get here. In that time, either it just started happening or I just started noticing this company, Commeep, whatever, is selling the exact same thing on Amazon for less money. I compared all the pinouts and everything else. These two wire harness adapters are exactly the same in every single way I can tell, except the Commeep one you'll get in a day or two and it'll be less expensive. So I'm gonna go ahead and use that one. I will link both down in the description so you can do as you please. But what we're looking to do here is that 6-pin deuter plugs into that white connector on our motherboard, and then both of our other power supplies would be plugging into this connector to supply power. Our modular EVGA here has 2 ATX power CPU connectors that will run up to the board. Well, we only have to run one of them, but it's got a couple of them here. So now, based on everything I've researched and everything else I've looked at, basically we just throw this box inside of that box. We won't get any screws in it or anything else, but this box will be in that box when we're done. Let's find out. Remove our prophylactic packaging. I'll give you guys a sad spoiler alert while I'm working on this. I have had the ATX power supply for this thing since like January. It is early September as I'm recording this, and I was talked into the other options by you guys. So I dragged my feet for a while hoping prices on this stuff would come down, which it kind of did, kind of didn't. We have an eco mode warning sticker here, 0 noise at moderate levels. I have read different things saying that like none of these things will work, including the computer may not actually shut off with the power button anymore. And that is all okay because we are headed somewhere else anyhow. Remember, we have made a mistake and we need to atone for it. So this guy is supposed to like kind of fit. I thought it would fit better than that. Yeah, it kind of fits. It looks like I might be able to get a screw in it, maybe, just so you can kind of see what I kind of see. It looks like if I worked hard enough, I might be able to get that screw hole and that mounting boss to line up. Like if I filed the case down a little bit or some things, maybe this power button would still hit it. Another thing I'm noticing, oh, that's actually really bad now that I look at it. So although I could do that, I'm realizing this thing has either an air intake or an air exhaust right there, and I wouldn't want to smash it up against the back of the case anyway. So I'm thinking what we're gonna do is just have this dude hanging out in space, flopping around in there, like in the most literal sense, that it will be in the case, but not really. So installed, it's time to get some wiring on it. This bundle here, you can see that MB right there, that would be for a normal ATX motherboard. So that is where our fancy schmancy adapter is gonna plug in. And the other ends of this cord both say PSU on them. So they plug into that brick. So I'm just gonna plug these guys in out here right now. That should be the nice, easy thing to do. There we go. I'm gonna uninstall this for a moment because it'll be easier to deal with. There's MB1, MB2. And while we're at it, let's find our CPU wire, which would be this guy here that says CPU right on it. And the other end of this one says GM there and CPU there, which I'm assuming means we want to plug it into CPU down here on our PSU. Sweet, sweet. And in that same bundle happened to be our VGA, as they have labeled it, which really means PCIe. And I've noticed that this is an optional 8-pin, so that will separate and give you 6 or 8. I guess that's a thing. I'm proving once again that almost everyone that watches my videos knows more about this stuff than I do. I think you guys just like seeing me suffer. So I'm just gonna plug this guy into VGA 1 and it's done. So if we had a video card in it that would take advantage of that, we would be ready to go. In my configuration, I actually don't need it, but since I know that's what you're all here to see, I will leave it as it is. Also, wire harness routing here is going to be a nightmare. I fully admit that it's going to be ugly, and it's just going to be the way it is. Also fully admit I'm not going to make the world's strongest effort at it, because I am going to be taking this all right back out here momentarily. But you could route this however you wanted to. What I will do is try and illustrate that we have plenty of wire to get there. Which to get from this SFX up to our motherboard connector, we do not. We cannot use the factory Dell routing. So we're just going to have to wing it. And also, if you were doing this for real, I would electrical tape off one of these. I wouldn't just leave it hanging out like it is. But since I am intentionally kind of half-A-ing it, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. We got that guy plugged in. And this guy, I've got all the room in the world, of course, to route and do whatever I wanted to. But again, since this is a temporary half measure, I'm just going to plug him in there. Okay. And that really should be it. All my drives and stuff are all powered off of the motherboard, and the motherboard is now powered. I think I will go ahead and put this CPU shroud cooler thing back on, because I have that wire harness there now. I just want to make sure I'm not showing you something that won't work. Make sure that that actually routes in. Yep, it fits just fine. Put my video card back in, because, you know, full faith in the beast now. That, and I just kind of want to show you how that was going to look with it stuffed in there. Plug the power supply in to the cord. Plug the cord into the kilowatt. See if fire shoots out. It did just do its immediate boot up thing. And it did just immediately shut down, but the power supply is still drawing 8 watts. So I think this power supply, the fan is probably still spinning, or something's still going on in there. Fan's not spinning, but it is drawing phantom power. It's pulling 8 watts, the Dell power supplies pull 0. So if I hit the power, now it's down to nothing. So it appears this does not shut all the way off, which, we knew that going in. At least I expected that going in. I just turned it back on, so it did its quick power up and down thing. And now it's just going to be a 7-watt energy vampire. You can decide how big of a deal that is to you. I'm going to say if you're in this deep, it's probably not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and put the side cover back on just to illustrate that it will. I'm pretty sure it will. And then I'm going to pipe this thing in and turn it on all the way and see if anything bad happens. Alrighty, I think there you can see it even says EVGA right there, so you know I'm not fooling with you. We've got our side cover back on. I've got it all plugged into a screen and stuff again. I'm going to turn it on and see if, you know, it like starts up normally and stuff like that. It's making the usual noises. Forgot about the kilowatt. That is also what I saw on the bigger Dell's power supply until it got settled in. So we'll give that a little bit of time to cook and see if we idle back down to like that 20 watts. And it looks like we pretty much have, you know, a couple watts this way or that way won't make any bit of difference. So I would say that's good. So I would say that was perfectly successful. And again, that was the Amazon power adapter. One thing I will say is if you're dead set on doing this, and you can see it fits just fine, one thing I would consider is this stuff, which is 3M VHB tape. VHB stands for very high bond. Automotive trim is held on with this stuff. So the stuff on sides of cars and like the emblems on the bumpers and stuff like that, this stuff is very strong. You probably could and should take this or something like it, even something from the hobby store would probably be fine, just double-sided, double sticky tape, and just put a patch or two right down on this rail, and then take this guy and stick him on. Before you do that, I suggest having your power cord plugged into the dang thing, because it might be kind of challenging to do it later. Let's kind of get her wang jangled on around there. There we go. Make sure the power switch is actually set to the on position, which it is right now. That's the straight line down, because I propose that you intentionally mount this guy, mount it, a couple of inches back so that there's some room for airflow to do its airflow thing here. Because with this big, I'm assuming, intake right here, you don't want to just deadhead that up against the case. This is, you know, just solid sheet metal back here. If for whatever reason you were super dedicated to this idea, you could of course cut this sheet metal out of this thing and run this thing all the way up to the rear and get a file out and open this thing up and all that. I'm down for doing it if you guys really, really want to see it, but all I'm going to be doing here is hacking up a perfectly good case for the sake of saving like 50 bucks on just buying the case I actually want instead of this one. So I'm not real wild about doing it, but I'll do it if you guys demand it. But what I would suggest if you're going this way is to go ahead, take some tape and stick this guy down, and then take the other end of your cord and just plug it into a power supply with a switch button on it. So if you actually want to turn the power supply to this thing off, you just click the switch on the outlet strip and you're done. So you don't have that 8-watt energy vampire just sitting here forever. Just make things a little bit easier on yourself. But that's going to conclude the SFX portion of the video. As you can see, making no effort whatsoever to do any kind of wire management. It actually still doesn't look all that awful. It is completely fine. Next up, the good old ATX, my a numero uno favorite for this. Welcome to the ATX power supply portion of the video. I'm going to do the cheesy YouTube thing where in a moment all this stuff's just going to disappear. If you want to see how to get your Dell power supply out, go back and watch that part of the video. And poof, it's all gone. And I've decided for this one I am going to use the Mod DIY supplied adapter, even though it is identical in every way to the Amazon one. Why not do it? I'm here. This is our ATX power supply. And this does kind of, if you work hard enough at it, actually fit in here, but it won't do it with a graphics card, and it won't do it without actually like cutting some of the case away, which I considered. When you compare an ATX to an SFX, you can see there's a significant size difference, and the fan orientations and where the wires come out and everything are completely different on all of them. So these SFXs are intended for just smaller cases overall, and if you're going this deep, that's probably not where you want to go. You probably want to go big or go home, right? Mr. ATX here is just going to be chilling outside. This one, as I said, is not modular because I got a good price on a not modular one. I really don't care personally. For me in the long run, it's going to be just fine. So our installation here is going to be ultra UGMO, but ultra good too. So we've got our big fan right there. We've got our air intake. I believe those are intakes. If I'm wrong, then, you know, shoot me. But that's all just going to be chilling outside the case, like literally chilling. We're going to run this big giant gaggle of wires through the hole where the old power supply was, and that's going to be that. And that, in all of its grace and beauty, is exactly what it looks like we did too. With this particular power supply, the wires where they come out are kind of low. You can't really get it on up there to be flush unless you kind of like pick it up and stick it there. You could duct tape that on, you could VHB tape it on, you could do whatever you wanted. What I propose you do is just leave it sit on your desk behind the computer, because if you are here, I would say your next steps for sure are going to be a new case and a new motherboard, almost certainly. I'm going to try to just put this board in a new case just as an increment to see what happens. That will probably be our next episode in this series, but I'm not counting on it. New motherboard's about $100, new case can be about $50. So what I'm saying here is, let's say this power supply was $100, so that's what you can afford this month. Next month, maybe you have another $100, you can buy a new motherboard, or maybe next month you get 50, buy a new case, whatever. So this is just the first stop of that evolution. So no need to get real bogged down about what it looks like or how much of a complete mess it is, because in too much time, it's just going to be a bad memory. So think of this solution as you would like a bad haircut. Just a matter of time, and nature's going to sort it out anyway. Here is our Mod DIY adapter, functioning exactly like the last one. I'll plug that guy in to the ATX sys, just like we did on the other one. And there it goes. We have our broken out PCIe power again with a 6 or 8 pin option, which is something the Dell didn't give us. And here they have ganged the CPU wire harness up as a double to begin with, and it looks like they do come apart somehow, maybe. I'm wondering if I even need to worry about it. It looks like those probably are 2 different connectors. I'm just going to try and plug it in as one. So here's our double guy. That's where it's going. It might be kind of fun to get this to release later. Anyway, it plugged in perfectly. The next disaster of this plan is just to smash all the wires back in this thing and put the case side back on. And of course the CPU shroud again. Again, wire harness management is not a priority for me here. There we go. Be a monster and just ram jam all those wires back in there. Slide our case side back on. And now only we know of the atrocities hidden within. And another issue I'm seeing is the HDMI out of our graphics card is in the way, so the PSU kind of has to sit off to the side. For about $5 you can get a little 90-degree HDMI adapter to improve that, but again, this is a short-term solution. We're doing all this in preparation to go into the future. Remember, you love yourself enough to get what you actually want. You didn't want this computer. That's what got us in the mess to begin with, so just tough it out for now. But just to prove a point, what power supply? Same story as before. Get her plugged into our kilowatt. It's probably already on, but I don't know. It is. It's doing its Dell thing. Turned itself on a little bit. Phrasing. It's also doing what the SFX did. It's not turning all the way off, so same rules here. Either manually reach back and flip the power supply off or put it on a surge protector. But she's looking good. Gonna turn it on. Unbury my mouse. No sparks or fire yet. It's behaving entirely normally. Booted up just fine. And I'll give this guy a moment or two and see if it settles back down to 20 watts. I bet it does. Yep, pretty much. Hanging out 23, 24. It might drop back down to 20 if I watched it long enough, but not a big enough power change from the others to worry about anything at all. And she's running just fine. So there you have it. Power supplies 3 different ways. These are all pretty straightforward, pretty easy things to do. To be honest, all I really did here was take the stuff I read on the internet, use that to buy stuff, and then just plug it in. Really wasn't any harder than that. Where I've had some conversations with folks is mostly debating around just doing an ATX PSU. An ATX power supply, from what I've seen in normal markets, disregarding good deals, sales, or whatever, this guy is about half the price of this guy, and where we're going, this is what we're going to want anyway, because I don't want to be strapped into another weirdo small case. You know, if we're doing this, let's do it. Also, you may notice all three power supplies are sitting here. This really is the 360 watt power supply. Yes, I really did just uninstall the 600 watt power supply, and I could have put this 360 back in it, but I put my 200 watt back in it instead. There's a very simple reason for that. Where we're going, we don't need it, brother. This guy, out of there, pretty much useless to us. In addition to straight up trolling you guys just a little bit, which is always fun, if you care to take a dare, I'll make a bet with you that probably, we'll say at least 50% of the people that watch this video are gonna end up doing this. And in a year's time, these things will either be free because there'll be so many on the secondhand market and that's just what happens, or they will be like 200 bucks, and this will be the dumbest option possible. As if prices on these are as affected as I think they could be by this video, that guy is likely going to go right back on eBay, and I will generate some money back for the channel, because what you're looking at right there is about a $300 video, ignoring about the $1,000 I have in the computer right now. So yeah, if we can move some stuff on and get some money back in the pockets, that'd be fine. If I end up being wrong in the comments, no problem. People stick fingers in my eye all the time a year after I release a video, so at least this time I'll know why. I do believe our next one is going to be the case swap video, so we can put the final nail in this coffin and just get our ATX guy to work. Unless i7 prices come down just a little bit. I am keeping my eye on them, and I really would like to put an i7 in this guy before we move things on along, and I'd like to do that with the 200 watt power supply, so we'll see. And that is exactly what just happened. I just ordered an i7. Not only did I order an i7, I ordered another 32 gigs of RAM. So the next upgrades on this thing are going to be probably to drop the 32 gigs of RAM in it, which by the way will be faster RAM to match the i7. We'll drop it in, we'll probably run the benchmarks again with the i3 just to see if we were RAM limited before, and then we'll swap out the i3, run all those benchmarks again, probably run a couple games and see how we did. Case won't be the next one. Instead, I spent like 500 some ish dollars to do the next evolution. Waiting the market out for prices to come down just hasn't been a winning strategy for me, so we're going to pay up and we're going to do it. For the 3880 series, I try and make a video on it about once a month, which means about every 4 weeks. We may do them just a touch quicker, but if you are wondering when the next one's going to come out, if it has not yet been 4 weeks, now you got your answer. Speaking of the next one, I appreciate you guys stopping in for this one, and we'll catch you then. I'm Max, that's Saddington Bear, and we make videos like this all the time. Here are a couple links to some other videos we've made, and we really appreciate you guys stopping in.